There's a ton of organizations built to help the local hashtag the 757 business community should be on your radar. What's up and welcome to the Fervent Four. Did you know that only 4% of businesses ever cross the annual $1 million revenue mark? Hello, I'm Zack Miller, author of Anomaly. With me today, I have my co-host Tim Ryan, lead man at StartWheel.org. Thank you so much for joining us. The Fervent Four is a weekly show each and every Thursday at 11 a.m. dedicated to sharing insights into growing a world-class business no matter the climate. Ted Counts leads business development at the Hampton Roads Chamber. Ted, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thanks for having me. Good to see y'all.
Hey,
Good to see you both.
Okay, so you have a name that is pronounced very different than the way it's spelled. As someone who was this hard even growing up? So like my first name is not the name that I go by, and I go by my middle name and an abbreviated name of my middle name, right? Has you having a kind of different pronunciation of your name helped or hurt you in kind of your career, kind of in that first icebreaker type of question with someone?
I think it's helped just because it becomes memorable. I mean, even if they get it wrong, it's memorable. Usually in the United States, most people pronounce it Tage, like a page in a book, which makes sense because in English, that's how it's spelled. The fact that it's Teg, it still throws people off. I mean, I joke that it's amazing how badly people can massacre a 4-letter word. I mean, I've had every imaginable version of Tage, Taj, Tag, everything, Tajay. And I don't take it personally. As I told somebody, if it even sounds remotely close, I just answer. And if it's the wrong person, then whatever. But no, I think it's completely memorable. I mean, I have people that I haven't talked to in sometimes decades that they may not even remember the face, but they usually remember the name just because it's so unique. So I especially in a service environment where I do talk to as many people as I have throughout my career, I'm actually thankful for it. It's pretty cool, and I get some really nice comments about it as well. So could be worse.
Well, as we pull out all the different clips, and if you want to use any one of the clips for marketing, you can use that very first question to educate people on how to pronounce your first name.
There you go. Sounds good. I like it.
A lot of people will probably learn. The most educational show that we've had, and this is episode 56. So.
There you go. There you go.
Did that make you feel comfortable, Teg?
Yeah, I like it. Dude, I like it.
Teg, how long have you been with the Chamber now?
It was 3 years, January 1st. So I'm going on about 3.5 years. I came on, I spent the last over a decade prior to coming to the Hampton Roads Chamber. I had been vice president of marketing for a local mortgage lender. Spent 11 great years with a team at Tideware Home Funding, which is based out of Chesapeake. Big shout out to Kim Curtis and her team. And the Chamber gave me an opportunity to kind of expand on what I was doing with them and get a chance to really be even more ingrained with the business community at a regional level. I had background many years ago, worked with the local business journal, Inside Business, and really enjoyed the business-to-business community and environment. And the Chamber is an opportunity to bring me back to that, and I love it. It's a great opportunity. I thoroughly enjoy the opportunity to connect with the business leaders in the community. Zack, I mean, we were talking about this before we got on the show, but when we talk about my name, it really has become an opportunity to get to know more people, and the more people I get to talk to in a day or a month, the better, the happier I am. So it's COVID had me a little stir crazy because it's nice to get to meet people on camera, but I'm definitely looking forward to getting back to seeing some people in person again. So,
Well, I mean, I think that we passed one another in the lobby of the chamber building, and we have never seen each other in person. So you had your mask on, I had
yeah,
my
it's
mask
from
on,
here. Yeah.
and then I was like, it took me a second to realize like, that, hey, there goes Teg, and it was like by that time you're probably in the elevator. But it's just so bizarre how long we've known people now and we've never seen them in person.
So I saw my mail lady when I had my office downtown. I saw her every single day, and then I saw her like 3 months ago, and I was at a different location. I was actually at the optometrist, getting a new pair of shades without the sunshade piece of it, and she didn't know who I was, but she heard my voice because of the mask. And she was like, "Oh, Zach, how are you?" And I was like, "I mean, I saw you every day. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's ridiculous." But whatever. It is weird. So even people that you can't always tell. It's I remember a lot of people talking about, "Oh, I can't see that you're smiling." So if like I was laughing or smiling, I'd be like, "Oh, I'm laughing. I want you to know that." So a chamber. So the local chamber is, I think, historically known as something called a Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
About a year ago, you guys rebranded off of that to be just the chamber. Historically, what have you known as a chamber of commerce, a business organization like that? What have you known that organization to be once you got into it? Was that kind of outside, inside look different? And what do you think it is now?
It's a lot different, and I think part of it there's a phrase or something that gets mentioned a lot within the chamber world that if you've met one chamber, you've only met one chamber. And a lot of that's due to the fact that within the Chamber of Commerce community, chambers really learn to adapt based on the communities they're serving. So in some communities, especially in smaller towns or counties, a chamber does everything from connecting small businesses or local businesses to doing what many of us see as CVB or Convention Visitor Bureau events or county fairs or parades down Main Street, while also trying to do economic development, while also trying to do workforce related issues. So it really varies from city to city, region to region. In our particular case, as a regional chamber, we tend to focus most of our efforts on the south side of Hampton Roads, while also doing a lot of collaborative and partnering with organizations and businesses from throughout the 17 municipalities that make up the 757. So our particular focus tends to be very advocacy heavy. We're lucky enough in this region to have a very strong regional economic development alliance. We have Sean Avery and his team at Workforce Council. And most of the cities locally have some sort of CVB or tourism arm on the government side. So we really tend to focus on the advocacy side of what we do to serve the business community and really act as a connector.
Just as people are listening, how would you define advocacy? Because I think it could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And a lot, when it comes to advocacy in our case, a lot of it is focused on everything from being a connector and a voice for the business community at the city council level, all the way through the elected officials at the state level. We don't do a lot on the federal side. Though we do obviously connect with the local officials that represent us at the federal level. But a lot of it is just being the voice for the business community so that when policy and legislation and decisions are being made that directly affect the business community, that we can be that voice for those businesses. Most people may or may not know that a large company or large corporation may have a governmental affairs representative on staff. They may have lobbyists that pay to represent their organization. But as you all well know, the large majority of small businesses can't afford to do that. They can't afford to have that one person dedicated to being the voice of whatever is happening within their particular industry, what's happening within their particular community. So we're that voice for them. We take feedback and information from our membership, and we use that to set our guidelines and our standards for how do we want to advocate on behalf of those businesses, so that we can be that voice for them. So that when they're just trying to open the doors in the morning and close the doors at night and keep the business running, we're the ones that can be talking to the elected officials and say, look, this is what's important to these business owners, and this is where we need to take things in a particular direction.
And if I remember correctly, I mean, in a sense, you all are almost the unsung heroes. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you all led an effort to go to Richmond because there was some talk about taxing PPP money, loans, and I believe that the chamber had a direct part in reversing that so that businesses that receive PPP funding wouldn't be taxed on that money. Is that correct? Did I understand that right?
We've had Emily Reynolds is our governmental affairs director. So Emily works with a lot of our local businesses, with Brian Stevens, our president and CEO, with our legislative priorities committee that really kind of looks at some of those issues and discusses, okay, what do we need to be able to go up to Richmond, whether it's through the General Assembly, that's primarily during that January, February time block when legislation is being voted on and laws are being established. But even the remaining 10 months out of the year, Emily's doing a tremendous amount of work just setting up for the following year. We have special sessions that are coming up. There are elections. In this case, we've got a large number of state-related elections that are going to be happening in November. It's Emily really is the voice for the business community, especially when it comes to legislative priorities and elected officials for the entire Hampton Roads community. And that in that particular case, even though a lot of where we focus on as far as our core membership is on the south side, when Emily's speaking in Richmond, I mean, she's truly speaking for the entire 757 business community.
So how do you guys truly understand the voice then, right? Because I could see it being all over the place. I remember hearing a story from Marcus Jones, former city manager of Norfolk, saying, at city council meetings, 10 people show up and we're a city of 252,000. Right. And so those 10 people are usually complaining one way or the other. How do you guys truly understand a voice that's supposed to be for however many businesses are in hashtag the 757?
No, and that's a great point. And a lot of it really is just doing our best to be as connected to the business community as possible. I mean, we're lucky enough to have one of the largest chamber member bases in the Commonwealth. So for that reason, we actually pull from a pretty large pool of business and community leaders, which is a huge help. Nothing against Northern Virginia, but I mean, Northern Virginia can be tough because when you go up there, there's a separate chamber maybe for Fairfax. There might be a separate chamber for Alexandria. I mean, you're in a fairly consolidated area. So geographically, they may be in a space the same size as Hampton Roads, but you've got a chamber for every one of those different localities or municipalities. It's a little bit different in Hampton Roads because we're already serving a fairly large group of cities to begin with. And then we do a really good job of collaborating with the other chambers of commerce, whether it's Bob McKenna up on the peninsula or Terry in Williamsburg. Brian Stevens, Emily Reynolds do a great job of collaborating with them. So not only are we hearing the voices from the Hampton Roads or the South Side community, but we're also pulling from the peninsula. We're pulling from Williamsburg. We're pulling from the Eastern Shore, Olive White, so that, to your point, we're actually speaking as one true region opposed to just, say, those that are focused on, say, Virginia Beach or Norfolk. Are there city-specific issues that come up? Absolutely. But typically when we're dealing with that, that's something that, to your point, Zach, that's usually where we are specifically addressing that at a city council level, not necessarily at a state level, say through the General Assembly.
A lot of our audience are people that are thinking about entrepreneurship, validating their idea, or they're just getting started. In your opinion, when's the right time for a new business to consider looking at a chamber? Or membership?
That's a great question, because there are a lot of variables to that. Sometimes, I mean, pure and simple, sometimes it's just finances. I mean, sometimes it's just not financially feasible to do so. We do try to tier our memberships in such a way that it provides an opportunity for a truly small business, what we call a solopreneur, to be able to come on for a much lower rate, for instance, than a traditional business or a large business. I think part of it too also depends on what is it that they're trying to get out of it. If even a truly small business owner really kind of understands what we're trying to accomplish from an advocacy role, they may be willing to invest, knowing that they don't necessarily have the time to be physically invested within the chamber. When I say physically invested, I mean by not only paying their annual dues and being part of the organization, but also participating, whether it's in our networking events, whether it's in our signature events that most people know about, such as the State of the City addresses or our legislative receptions. So it really kind of depends. Some business owners are lucky enough, even small business owners are lucky enough to be in a role that either they or someone on their team can actually get involved. And typically where we see that is even from those solopreneurs, where they recognize the fact that in order to be able to grow the business, they're not going to be able to just rely on their personal contacts. I mean, they're only going to be able to, if they sell widgets, they're only going to be able to sell widgets to their mom, dad, and close friends for so long and still be able to start to generate the revenue they're looking at. So they've got to go out and grow that book of business. So to do that, they've got to get involved. And that's where a lot of our small business partners are able to get involved with the chamber, participate in the networking events, and build that sphere of influence to hopefully be able to pull from to grow their network.
Networking is something that I think historically until 2020 hit was something that was a way that a lot of people got their name out there.
Yeah.
Is there something that you did differently in the last 14 months or so to get attention other than your name? And then what has worked for you just in general historically, as we're kind of, it seems like hitting the end of this, the vid, as Kevin Hart says.
Absolutely. I think to the credit of our entire team, and shout out to my team, shout out to Priscilla and her team on the communications program. I think what we did, like you guys did the same thing. I mean, many of those who really pivoted quickly in the Hampton Roads community jumped on the ability to use Zoom and use some of these platforms to be able to continue to connect with the membership. Is it the ideal way to be able to network? No, but it still gave people an opportunity to connect a name with a face, even if it was on a screen. So almost immediately after going into lockdown, we started doing some small group networking sessions that were done via Zoom that enabled people to be able to connect. Ironically, sadly, in some cases, because there was so little happening, it did allow people the time to be able to get on these pretty regularly and be able to continue to connect. So it did allow a lot of our members to be able to get on these events weekly, continue to talk to one another, continue to build some sort of rapport with one another. And even as we've transitioned into some of these hybrid events, we've done a lot to stay within the guidelines that were set for us by the governors. We did a lot of small group networking sessions. And ironically, what we have found is that in many ways, those have been more effective than a lot of the larger networking events that we had done in the past. I mean, when we did a traditional member reception, we might have 50, 60, 70 people. But you all know, you show up at a room with 50, 60, 70 people and you're there for an hour. It's impossible. It is literally impossible to get to know that many people in that short a period of time. So you still were only connecting with a handful of them. What we found is since we've moved to these smaller group networking sessions, the connections are so much stronger because we get to know one another better. We get to tell our stories better. And on top of that, we're finally somewhat face to face with that. So we've really done an awful lot of pivoting. I mean, it seems like every month or two over the last 18 months, we've been changing and adapting and doing different things just to kind of stay within the guidelines that have been set for us.
Maybe too much of a personal question, but are you wearing like gym shorts right now?
I'm actually wearing fishing shorts right at this moment. Everything from the suit top down is basically shorts and fishing shoes. So absolutely,
the COVID mullet. I dig it. I
yes,
dig it.
exactly.
That was a good answer. I was not expecting that. Okay, so in that world of kind of hybrid, I guess we're starting to see a little bit of that where people are doing some digital, some form of digital, some back in person to some extent.
Yeah.
It seems like big events also are figuring out a way to do hybrid and make money off of it, where, you know, you might have historically had, let's just say 1,000 people go to Virginia Beach Convention Center.
Yes.
And that was it. And if you were there, you were there. Now you're saying maybe that's a smaller in person, but there's even more people that are watching around the world. Is that what you think is going to be the future? Like, let's hear your prediction on how, like, events, as an organization who puts on a ton of events a year, like, do you see the hybrid model being the future, or do you think we're going to go back one way? Where do you kind of see that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Our Virginia Beach State of the City was exactly what you just described, and you're absolutely right. In a traditional year, we can get approximately 1,200 people at the Virginia Beach State of the City, which I believe is typically the single largest event we host during the year. And the place is packed. I mean, it's an absolutely great event. It's an incredible way to network and connect with people.
Is that at capacity too, at that 1,200 number? It's probably pretty close because of tables.
Yeah, because we use the ballroom in that particular case.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we basically can't get any bigger than that. So to give you an idea, when we had the limitations going into this year's State of the City for Virginia Beach, which was a couple months ago, I don't even remember how many people we had in the room. It might have been 10, if I remember correctly, because at that time I think we were still pretty locked down as far as number of people. So what we found, though, was you had several hundred people who actually viewed it on live stream while it was happening. And to a certain extent, I think some of us were kind of like, oh, man, that's a bummer. I mean, we could have had maybe 500 more people view the event afterwards. Yet when we went back a couple days later, we were already at 17, 18, 1,900 people who had viewed it. And I believe last time I checked, it was well over 2,000 people had viewed it. So even if you backed out a few people who maybe went back and looked at it a second time, the point was from an eyeball standpoint, from whether it's sponsorships, whether it's connecting with people, whether it's getting the message out, we essentially went from 1,200 capacity to well over 2,000 by the simple fact that we were able to live stream it. So, Zach, I think you're absolutely right. I think we almost can't go back because we've now almost kind of set a standard to this point that there's always going to be that in-person connection. There is absolute value with being able to show up at the convention center, shake somebody's hand, connect with them in a one-on-one environment, get to know people. But I think the idea that there's going to be an expectation that even if it's not live streamed, that there's at least a video or some ability to go back and watch these and give more people more eyeballs to these. I think sponsors are going to expect it. I think viewers are going to expect it. I think the community as a whole, not just the business community, but the general community is going to expect it. So in many
you guys aren't
ways,
even making money off of the stream yet, right? And so that's the next, at least it doesn't sound like it, right? So it seems like there are a lot of events that had done that in the past, but I guess accelerated that. Tim and I have been saying this since the beginning. COVID is just accelerating things that were already going to happen by 5 to 7 years, right?
Yes.
And so you see an event like this where you guys just said, oh, there's 500 people here. Restrictions or not, let's say you're at 1,200 in person, right? Yep. And that's at capacity, right? Well, now, or this could be, you know, from a music perspective. Okay, we're at the amphitheater, there's 20,000 people there, but guess what? There's 20,000 that also want to see it. You could start throwing on an extra $10, $15, $20 a head to see that live show. And guess what? People made a lot more money, right? It's like Busch Gardens trying to figure out how to make money year round. It's just being creative and figuring out a revenue model that makes sense. And if someone wants to see that thing live and you guys can profit off of it, then it makes sense to me, right? I mean, you know,
absolutely. And I think there's a revenue stream there, whether you want to charge for the individual eyeballs or not.
The sponsor banner on there, there's so many things that could be done.
That's exactly right. So even if you still want to give the viewership the ability to do it for free, there's always that ability to go back to sponsors and say, look, I'm either going to charge more or bring on more sponsors because I can get you in front of more eyeballs once we get you up on the screen. So, yeah, I think there's multiple revenue sources out there.
Right? I mean, why wouldn't you do that? Hey, by the way, instead of this $10,000 thing for you, we're going to get you 3 times the amount of people.
Yeah.
And they're going to actually, because of the way that they're streaming it, they're going to see your logo more.
Yeah.
So we're going to
get a period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And that's for nonprofits. It's for for-profits. I mean, it's a business model that I think you're going to see across the board. I mean, for service providers that are going to be able to do that, I think there's just so many opportunities to do that. That to your point, I think we're headed there. But I think this just became a catalyst for getting people to go. For everybody who said, I don't want to buy the equipment right now, or it's just
those are
it's
the people
too hard.
Right? Those are the people who won't move into that are the ones that are going to be complaining about it months later. Like, oh, how come I didn't do this? Whatever. Because you weren't willing to go with it, right? It's not even like a risk in this kind of situation. Like, you know the eyeballs are there.
Yeah.
Like,
and it forced us to do it. I mean, you either did it or you just immediately fell behind people. So it was definitely a weeding out process pretty quickly. So,
yeah, I'm curious. Like, I don't know if I'm just in a unique position as far as where I am, but I mean, as far as, is there some sort of agreement with all the different chambers? So I live in York County. So there's the York County Chamber, and then there's the Greater Williamsburg, and then there's the Peninsula Chamber, and then there's the Hampton Roads Chamber. You know, so it's like, not that I have 4 chambers of commerce all, hit me up all the time, but at the same time, it's still 4 different chambers of commerce. You know, do you all talk about that amongst the different chambers, or I'm just curious what, from your level, what the discussion is, or are those memberships recognized throughout the different chamber network?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is similar to like an affiliate opportunity. We don't have affiliate memberships per se between the different chambers. We all do run completely separate as far as our membership and the benefits we provide. I think where we work best with each other, and this is due in large credit to Brian Stevens, who's our president and CEO, Bob McKenna, Terry up in Williamsburg. Their willingness to work together more from the standpoint of the issues that we're working on, whether it's things like the 757 recovery and resilience, even well before COVID even hit. When I first came on board, Brian was already working collaboratively with those chambers about issues that affect the entire 757 business community. So that whether it's through the advocacy, whether it's through some of the outreach that we're doing, that we are doing that in a collaborative manner. I think, especially in Hampton Roads, I haven't been in a chamber environment outside of the Hampton Roads community other than to meet some of my counterparts. So I can't speak for them, but I know at least in this community, we have a really good working relationship with each other in that we kind of know who we are and who we're trying to serve. So while there are some businesses, for instance, that are based on the peninsula and are members of our chamber because they do business on the south side, they work and partner with different organizations locally. I'm not necessarily up there trying to purge all of Bob McKenna's membership so they can be part of us, and he's not doing the verse down here, and Bob's not trying to do it in Williamsburg. I mean, we have what is a pretty cordial relationship between the different chambers. And as such, we try to communicate with each other as much as possible so that we are serving all of our members to the best ability that we can. And it goes back to Doug Smith talks a lot about this adage that Hampton Roads has never been a very collaborative community. And honestly, for decades, we really weren't, whether that was at the municipal level or even through some of the organizations. But I think that narrative in the last 5 years, even well before COVID, I think has changed dramatically. The fact that we're even talking today, I mean, Zack, you've been on my podcast. I'm talking to you guys. I work with a lot of the local business associations, whether it's the Virginia Beach Hotel Association at the oceanfront, or whether it's Central Business District, Portsmouth Partnership. I mean, the days of us staying in our own little silos with our own little memberships and somehow trying to truly serve the Hampton Roads business community while we're staying in our own little silos, I think is an old adage. And it's something that anyone who continues to do that, I think, is just simply falling behind, because the collaboration is just too strong right now between this community for us not to continue in that same direction.
I think from a leadership standpoint, I mean, for the Hampton Roads Chamber, I mean, if there was some sort of program to really show regionalism and take it to the next level, I mean, if you had some sort of affiliate program where you paid an X amount of dollars, but each different chamber that you want to be part of gave like a 10% thing, and then the money kind of funneled downward, just to really show that unified approach. I mean, it just that would be really cool to see. That would be my little plug, just because I think that there's a lot of businesses that I'm sure have multiple chamber memberships, and to streamline that and to have a universal front to say, hey, we are leading this. People want regionalism, and we're gonna, we hear it and we're acting on it. That'd be really neat to explore.
Yeah, well, I'll never say never, because I mean, we were saying never about a lot of things. I mean, 3-5 years ago, and a lot's changed just in that time. So yeah, I mean, you just never know. There's opportunities to come about all the time, and I think that's the key, is having leadership that has an open mind to think like that.
And there was a positive first step in terms of like the Recovery and Resilience Task Force, where the Peninsula Chamber with the Hampton Roads Chamber and Greater Williamsburg, signing that agreement and making it very public in the sense of, hey, we're unified on this. We're not going to be duplicating effort. What one chamber says is backed by the other two. We're all in together.
Absolutely.
I've been in the business community for over a decade now. And as I really look back and reflect, I think that the infighting, the lack of collaboration that people talk about is actually BS. And it's actually not at the actual lower level, where people aren't like, oh my God, I live in Chesapeake and I do this and this. It's like, it's just this fight that has continued that makes no sense. And it's just something, it's like a scapegoat. Oh, the reason why we aren't here is because we haven't worked with this thing. Right? We're really no different than any other region. Oh, we're a cul-de-sac. Really, Miami's a pretty big cul-de-sac, and they seem to be doing just fine, right? There's always an excuse. Oh, we're more transient than any other place. Actually, Washington, D.C. is more transient, right? We're not that dense. So to me, it's like, it's always been, and I've been on both. I've been on that side where I've been like, we need to collaborate more, because I when you get into a community, you're like, well, what are other people saying? Okay, well, that makes sense. But then as I really look at it, it's like, there really isn't, in my opinion, a lack of collaboration. It's just been, we are telling this narrative that is absolute gibberish. That's nonsense. Like, I've seen like big time articles in big time publications, not local. And some of the quotes from people would literally be like, oh yeah, we have a problem. We historically have talked about fighting with this city because we couldn't get something done that's in your backyard. It's like, hold on a second. That narrative that you're telling the world is the most ridiculous thing that you could be telling. Here you have an opportunity to get in front of millions of people, because that publication is going to be viewed by millions of people. And you're talking about random collaboration issues that mean absolutely nothing to this. To me, it's storytelling, it's narrative. If it's non-issue, every city across the country and probably across the world has very similar issues like this. We just allow the narrative to control it instead of actually doing things about it. And so to me, it's nonsense. I I live in Chesapeake now. My business is in Norfolk. It means no difference. I'll go to Virginia Beach. Tim lives in Yorktown. Who cares? It really means absolutely nothing. And I continue to tell people, hey, by the way, you telling other people this thing is irrelevant. It's an irrelevant data point, and let's just tell the narrative that we want, right? And I think that's the story that needs to get out instead of, oh, now we're collaborating. Who cares? We don't need to say that we're even collaborating at this point. Just do your job and tell the positive story that's going to put us in a better front. Not, oh, we're collaborating now, because that's what I still continue to hear in these organizations is we're collaborating now. Who cares? The business owner doesn't care that you're collaborating. The employee that's working there, the teammates don't care. The person who owns a house in different places, no one cares. No one cares about that. It's high level gibberish. And instead,
and I'm sure it's the same too in Texas. If with membership, you get people complain, oh, I don't get anything out of being a member of the chamber. And it's like, well, what did you put into it to get and not get anything out of it?
Yeah. Sure.
Well,
but
and
imagine if we made that, imagine if instead of talking about, oh, we're collaborating now, that narrative went away because it's irrelevant, in my opinion. And we just talked about the things that people wanted to see. We're wasting opportunities. We're wasting space on a story that isn't going to help move things to the next level. And we need to be telling the story of what we want things to be happening, not some randomness. Done.
Well, I will say in 30 years of being in the business community, I think part of it is there's a generational aspect to it. I think within certain generations, the non-collaborative narrative is more anecdotal than it is standard. And I think the younger generations, it's to your point, Zach, it's not really that much of a conversation. I mean, my kids don't see boundaries. They know they live in Virginia Beach per se, but they don't necessarily see a boundary between when they leave Virginia Beach and go to Norfolk to go do something, or if they're going to go out to Chesapeake to go hang out. I mean, the biggest boundaries they ever saw was the fact that the school systems happened to be labeled for a different school or a different city. So I do think, to your point, Zach, that the more that next generation continues to move into leadership, the less the collaborative narrative is going to be brought into it, and it's just going to be an assumptive. That's just how we work as a region. And by the time my kids are in our positions within leadership in this community, I do agree with you that the collaborative narrative isn't going to be brought up as much. It's just going to be how they do business on a day-to-day.
Yeah. So even from a celebration standpoint, so I believe it was Homes.com got acquired by CoStar for about $155 million recently, right? So if I was pushing the marketing behind this region, I don't care what city that they're in, I'd be like, yo, by the way, you could start a business in Norfolk, start a business and hashtag the 757, and you can sell it for $152 million within a couple of years. That's it, right? It's to promote the positive things that you want people to see that are going to help push things to the next level. Hey, by the way, we have 35,000 people here at Something in the Water with a guy who, is homemade and has done these amazing things, right? Yep. That's it. Only tell those really positive stories, because then people will start to see that when these publications are picking that up, and they're like, oh my goodness, I need to be there.
Yeah.
And I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I mean, with Something in the Water, I mean, it's been a couple of years now, but I think Airbnbs were selling out in Williamsburg. Yeah, I mean, everybody benefited from that. It wasn't just Virginia Beach. I mean, it was everybody every hotel, every Airbnb, everybody all the way up to Williamsburg and beyond. So it definitely, it's happening. And it's just,
absolutely.
Right.
Hey, so something along those lines with Airbnb and stuff like that, like with so Airbnb, the Ubers of the world, I think in this region and many other regions too, there is pushback about stuff like this, business tax, should you have a taxi system and Uber and things like that. How and maybe you weren't here at the chamber yet or something like that, but how does a chamber kind of support or not support something like that that's new and innovative, that hasn't historically been something? Because I think we're going to continue to see that in the future with things that you wouldn't expect, but then become unicorns.
Especially as we try to attract the younger generation, that's just part of their everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a delicate balance at times. And it's to be totally blunt, it's why I'm on the membership side and Emily Reynolds is on the governmental affairs side. But it is a balance, and it even changes. That is a good example where no matter how collaborative we are, there are still 5 separate Southside cities, and within each of those cities, there's still a separate city government, a separate mayor, separate city council. So those decisions are really being decided by those elected officials within those specific municipalities, and then how we do or don't advocate based on what those policies are really again goes back to the feedback we're getting from the business community from the standpoint of what is best for the business community, and how do we learn to continue to adapt as we move forward. And that it's just something, it's very, very fluid, because that's a perfect example of something that it changes from different municipalities. I mean, the way someone may be responding to those short-term rentals, say in Sandbridge, compared to someone who's in a what might be considered a traditional neighborhood in, say, Ghent or even parts of Chesapeake, may be completely different. And that's where Emily and Brian and the team that we work with from a advocacy standpoint really kind of have to look at that and work with the different communities to figure out what's best for the business community, and specifically what's best for the business community within those specific municipalities. But you're absolutely right. I mean, as with most things, you have to kind of learn to adapt because things change. I mean, a perfect example in Norfolk was scooters. I mean, I went to Dallas a few years back, and scooters were everywhere. I mean, it's just a standard way to get around town. Right. And when scooters first got brought up in the 757, I mean, people were freaking out. I mean, people are going to get hurt. They're going to fall off scooters. They're going to be running into people. Right. But the reality is, if you look at downtown Norfolk, I mean, maybe there's an anecdotal story somewhere that may prove me wrong, but for the large part, I haven't seen a lot of issues with them. People seem to be using them. They seem to be effective. It's a great final mile tool for a lot of our constituents.
I mean, the biggest thing that I just keep on going back to is just the fact that the number one conversation that's talked about is attracting and retaining the younger talent.
Yes.
But yet we make the younger talent wants to be able to go to food trucks. They want to be able to use Uber. They want to be able to Airbnbs. Yeah, they're just that's part of their DNA. And it's just like we're biting the hand that feeds us. It's like until we adopt the things that are going to attract that younger and new talent, we're going to continue to be stuck in this do loop and be in the same situation.
I mean, even if there was bad things with scooters or whatever we're talking about, right? Those are outliers in most cases. Yes, bad things happen at hotels. Bad things happen at strangers' houses. People will get hurt on scooters. It also says wear a helmet. You know, there's a lot of things in these situations. And so I think it's kind of like it's like, don't say it, but don't just say it and then actually just get out of the way and make these things happen, because otherwise people are getting so angry about stupid things, in my opinion, that just like, okay, you know what? And most of the time, these scooters that everyone was probably pushing around about, like, no, I never see anyone on those things. So like, you're worrying about things that are so irrelevant. It's just like, who cares?
Yeah. And that's got to put it. I mean, I get it for you, Tag. I mean, it puts the chamber in a tough spot because you're trying to manage both sides, you know, and it's just so. Yeah.
Well, and that's why we do what we do. I mean, because you're absolutely right. There are times where you look at a topic and you think this seems like it should be an easy thing, but the reality is, when you're talking about legislative topics, when you're talking about business topics, when you're talking about just leadership in general, for every topic, there's a million different personalities and a million different theories. There's a million different perceptions as to whether that particular issue is a positive or a negative issue. It's why we have elections. It's why we have teams like ours that I don't want to say pick a side, but that advocate on behalf of. And in our particular case, we're advocating on behalf of the business community. Is that always going to align with the community at whole? Maybe, maybe not. But as a business association, the reason we exist is because a core group of business leaders have come together and said, look, you are the voice of the business community. And to the best of our ability, we take what we believe is the majority rule of that voice. And that's what we do our best to advocate on behalf of. So are we not always the most popular? Sure. I mean, it's just part of doing what we do. But I think Emily Reynolds in her role, Brian Stevens in his role, I think they do an exceptional job at it. And even, I mean, we talk to you guys because, I mean, you all work with the small business community. It's even that balance between the small business community and the larger business community. Going back to narratives, the fact that the narrative that we serve the big businesses, that you guys are always looking out for the big business. The irony is 85 to 90% of our membership are considered small businesses, which really aligns with the 757 as a whole. So we do everything we can to balance that as well, to understand that when we're advocating on behalf of policy, we recognize the fact that we need to not only be speaking for the business community as a whole, but balancing the needs of the small business community along with the larger corporations, because any large municipality wants to be attracting those Fortune 500 companies. The Commonwealth wants to be the number one state to do business. And in order to do that, the reality is you've got to be able to attract large corporations that bring a lot of jobs and a lot of revenue to a community, because to a certain extent, that's what pays the bills. But you also have to recognize that 85 to 90% of your business community is that small to medium-sized business owner and employees. So how do you balance that? And that's something that, like I said, it's not an enviable position to be in at times, but I think we do our best to balance that so we are serving the entire region as well as we can.
The buy local movement is kind of what I'm hearing out of that, right? So I don't know, 5-10 years ago, the buy local movement really pushed through as a big marketing campaign. I think actually one of the companies locally started it, Independent We Stand, through Still, which is something that most people don't know either. But what's interesting is, or like the whole buy local thing to me, like, it seems like it's kind of run its course and people don't care the same way anymore. They'd rather care for convenience, right? They'd rather go on Amazon, Target.com, Walmart.com, get that thing now, and that's all they care about. But I do think that people want to support local when they can, things like that. Like, how can someone support the buy local movement, their local small businesses and things like that? What's the best way? Because, you know, it seems like that whole buy local movement doesn't have the clout that it once did, because convenience isn't there the same way that some of these other things are, and people care more about convenience than.
Well, certainly now in COVID.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think to a certain extent, COVID kind of helped a lot of the small business. Now, I'm not saying they're not struggling, because Lord knows a lot of our small to medium-sized businesses have struggled over the last 18 months. But at the same token, I know just in my neighborhood, and again, this is somewhat anecdotal, but when we went on lockdown, one of the places we had food delivered from the large majority of the time were small, privately owned restaurants right here close to our neighborhood, because I could either run over and do pickup right at their front door, or they could in turn deliver to us because we were close together. I think the other sometimes narrative that people tend to forget is that just because the brand or the logo on the front door is considered a national brand, that somehow that's a corporation. Which, yes, from a franchise standpoint, maybe that is, but I think people tend to forget that in many cases, the person who actually owns that franchise as a franchisee, the person that's managing that location and the staff that work there, those are all local people.
Yeah.
There's nothing not local about that, except that maybe the brand on the front door. So and even with your larger corporations, I mean, a perfect example is like an ADP that's in downtown Norfolk. I mean, they're not only national but international.
Right.
But the hundreds and hundreds of people that work in there, they're all local. So the brand, I think, is something that sometimes people get too caught up in as it's national or it's corporate or they're not local. There's very little about any of these companies that's not local, simply because that's who those people are. Now,
so then in that mindset, is the buy local movement irrelevant then because everything is local?
no, I think where buy local has been very effective, and I think from a marketing standpoint has been very valuable, is the difference sometimes between a buy local and a larger corporation is because I am a franchise owner and because I do have the brand awareness. I've got a company behind me that has the dollars to help promote that brand. So if I open a Wawa, it may be locally run and managed, but everybody knows Wawa because Wawa has strong marketing dollars behind it. I think where the buy local becomes more effective is when you have a buy local campaign and you have these websites that help pull together a lot of these locally owned and startup businesses. That's where you have that ability to be able to compete from a branding and marketing standpoint that maybe they otherwise wouldn't if they were just doing it on their own. Because there's always value in numbers. And if you can do collaborative efforts like that at a buy local level, then that gives me an opportunity to know about a local restaurant, a local retailer that maybe I otherwise wouldn't, because they can't afford to go drop 10 grand on a marketing campaign in a local pub or radio or TV necessarily. But if they can collaborate with all these other small businesses and do a buy local campaign, or they can do some of these localized websites, they're now using those tools to get that out. And I think part of it too is that a lot of times people forget that, like retailers, for instance, if I'm a restaurant, the reality is the large majority of people that are coming to my restaurant are typically within a relatively small geographic area.
Yeah, probably 5 miles or less.
Yeah. So I don't need to, and when we talk about, Tim, when we were talking about membership, for instance, I don't need to be going out and attracting a membership necessarily that's in Williamsburg if it's a retailer or a restaurant that 90% of their members are only, or 90% of their customers are only within the Williamsburg community. Go ahead.
No, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, so it's definitely something. Did I lose y'all?
No.
Okay.
Sorry. There's the worst thing with the internet and all this is the internet drops.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's going back to that buy local, I think that's a great example of where those type of initiatives can be incredibly valuable. And I do think it's a great reminder. I mean, again, this is totally anecdotal, but I think like most branding, there's a reason we do branding and marketing. There's a purpose behind it. And I think where buy local comes in is that it is that little reminder that if I go out to the store or if I'm going to go to a restaurant, there's that little voice in the back of my mind that says, hey, if X restaurant owner, if he's local, if maybe there's a personal connection there, if that's the only reason for supporting him, then great. I mean, that's the whole idea is giving people that extra reason to go support that business, because it is a small business owner. He is local. He does have those local ties. And I think there should be a lot of value to that. I mean, it's that whole adage that we do business with people that we know and we trust and we like. And if there's that connection with small business owners and retailers and restaurant owners, then hey, all the better. I'm all for it.
What's your favorite chamber event that you are most excited to attending as the dust is starting to settle?
Wow, that's a good question. Right now, pretty much anything that gets me face to face with people, because it's just been way too long since I got to do that. I mean, I would say one of the most fun things we do is probably the one thing that is probably least likely to be kind of the prototypical Hampton Roads Chamber event. I mean, a lot of the events we do are somewhat formal. They're typically luncheons, very business focused. But the one event we've been doing for, gosh, I want to say it's been well over a decade now, is what we call the Megamixer. It's the business to business expo that we host in Virginia Beach. It's always the Monday before Halloween. So it's always the way we kind of wrap up October and head into the holiday season. Traditionally, we have over 100 exhibitors that come to that, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of people that come through that expo every year. It's fun. It's the one time we kind of let loose. I mean, people decorate their exhibit tables. There's a Halloween theme. People are bringing in pumpkin contests, and I mean, business people that traditionally you don't see them in anything but suit and ties and dresses and high heels, and they're showing up in costumes and everybody just goes all out for it. And it's a business to business environment, but it's the most fun, relaxed, easy to network event. And it's open to the public. So whether you're a member of the chamber or not, obviously our exhibitors are member partners, but we throw the doors open and tell everybody that wants to show up, come in. Like I said, pre-COVID, we had several hundred. And actually last year, it happened to coincide when the governor had kind of backed off on some of the restrictions. So we actually were able to still pull it off. We couldn't do quite as many exhibit tables last year, but we still did it. And it was kind of a breath of fresh air for a lot of people because we had all gone in lockdown last March, stayed that way kind of into the summer. And we kind of opened things up a little bit in the fall. And we kind of managed to get that in right before we did the lockdown, before the holidays again. And it was just, I mean, the joy on people's faces to be able to show up at an event like that and be able to see each other face to face and connect and have a good time. It's a blast. And it's definitely one of the most fun things we get to do every year. And I definitely look forward to it. So we got a good, 4 or 5 months to go before the next one. So yeah, y'all are invited. Come on down and join us.
You guys have some new office space as well. You guys moved recently. Have you had a chance to even enjoy the new space?
I have. I've actually probably spent more time in it than I'd like. But it's it's nice. We're down in the World Trade Center. The timing worked out pretty well just because we were planning on consolidating a little bit of space anyway. There are worse places in the world than to be right there off Waterside Drive and overlooking the beautiful Elizabeth River. If ever there was a time that you get up in the morning, you have a cup of coffee, walk into the office, and remember why the 757 is such an absolutely cool place to live, that's it. I mean, there are just only so many places in the world where you can watch anything from a kayaker to literally an aircraft carrier go down the same waterway, all in a day's work. You can't beat that. It's awesome.
Or see the Staten Island ferry from Harbor Park go get repaired down the street.
I mean, exactly.
But I mean, those are the stories that need to constantly be retold, right? I mean, it's like, hey, like you could live anywhere, but you're not going to be able to see this little thing, right? And so that's what I was getting at on my rant earlier. It's like, tell the story that's actually going to make a positive impact instead of these other things. And I think that's what gets like people just forget about that. And it's just like, ugh.
You are absolutely right. The thing I absolutely love, and I won't pick on the particular town or city, but just last week I went down. I traveled all the way down to Florida, made my way back up the East Coast, and Brian Stevens walked into my office, said, "How'd it go?" And I said, it was fine, but it was a reminder that I literally don't want to be anywhere else in the country other than the 757. I mean, the fact that I can work in downtown, be in a city environment, go walk the streets, see people, say hi, and then head home and know that in 4 minutes I can be kayaking and fishing on the back bay. And if I get tired of that, I can go to the ocean front and kick around there. Or if I get tired, I can go up to Williamsburg and go see the historical sites. I mean, it's just
without a lot of traffic either. right? Now people will talk about
Yeah.
traffic, but our traffic is actually significantly less than other places.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think our daily commute traffic is 25 minutes, where the national average is 45 minutes. So we're almost halfway less than that. I mean, it's just like, guys, like your data doesn't match what you're mad about. Like, get over it. I mean, you can be to Williamsburg from downtown Norfolk oceanfront in like 45 minutes. I mean, that's the end of the the top and the bottom of the region. That's a positive thing.
Exactly. I live in what I joke is like the cul-de-sac of Virginia Beach, because I'm almost a pungo. And the fact that even on a busy day, I can still be in downtown Norfolk in maybe about a half hour. And yes, are there days where it becomes longer because there's bad traffic or the such? And is the traffic getting home at times tough? Yeah. But again, to me, that little sacrifice is so worth what we get to experience as a region that I wouldn't give it up. And quite honestly, because of all the renovations that are being done right now, I mean, there's literally billions of dollars being put into the transportation system.
So Back
within
Bay is
Hampton
way
Roads.
down there. I'm looking at it on a map. Wow.
Yeah, we're down here in the corner of Virginia Beach. So
that's cool.
But yeah, it's a beautiful space.
How wide is that at the widest part? A couple miles? 10 miles?
Oh, geez. Oh, you're talking about going towards like Knott's Island?
I guess.
Yeah. Knott's Island's pretty narrow to get down. You're talking well south of Pungo at that point. So
still looks cool.
Yeah. No, it's very cool. Anybody ever want to go kayaking or fishing with me? Open invite. I even got an extra kayak. All you got to do is show up. There
you go. Anything we haven't talked about today that you want to talk about, Tech?
No, I mean, I appreciate your time. I mean, like I said, I know we were talking about the whole collaborative effort, but to that point, I mean, I really am grateful for what you all have been doing for the small business community. I sit 2 doors down from Jim Carroll. And I know you all partner with him probably daily, if not multiple times per day. But for everything you guys have done, not just during the COVID period, but just in general for our small business community, for the 757, I can't thank you all enough. I think there are so many organizations that are all now working together to really move things forward in the 757. This recovery and resilience effort, I think, is something that's going to be a game changer for us as a region compared to what we dealt with coming out of the 08-09 crash. I think we're better suited to come out of this a lot quicker and be in a much better shape. And it's due in large part to individuals like yourself that are helping us move things forward. So I can't thank you all enough for what you do, for having me on, for giving us a voice to talk to your constituents. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be with you today.
Yeah, my last little plug as we leave is just drop an idea out there with your new office space right where you are, right across the street from Town Point Park. You should have a nice outdoor mixer. Friday night, people are just itching to get out to see one another. It can be outdoors. It can be fun, safe, and that'd be a great place for maybe a quarterly or a monthly chamber event to get
Absolutely. We've even got a patio. So anybody want to show up, you can even come in unannounced. Just make sure I'm at the office. We'll kick out on the patio, have something to drink and watch the crowd in Town Point Park. So
there you go. I was going to say Wine powered by the Hampton Roads Chamber.
There you go. I don't want to step on Festivent's toes. So yeah, we'll work something out though.
It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Appreciate it, and continuing the old kayaking and Back Bay.
Absolutely.
Enjoy that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. We will see you next week. Peace.